Hey Mom Tribe. So it's me, Sade, your favorite doula, lactation specialist, and birth educator. On this week's episode, we are going to be focusing on birth planning and how to create like that perfect birth plan that really aligns with who you are as a person, what your vision is for your birth, and just how you want to experience everything in total during early labor and throughout the delivery process up until postpartum. So let's dive in and get started. All right, so for me, there's 5 main elements that go into birth planning, and that's going to be early labor, active labor, the delivery, and wait, did I say that right? Yeah, early labor, active labor, delivery, postpartum, newborn care, postpartum, but a little out of order. Anyways, you get the idea, right? So those are like 5 components that I like for everyone to include in their birth plan, especially like I require like all of my doula clients to take a childbirth education class because I just believe it is super important to know what your options are, to do a little bit of research and have a good idea of the different medical terms, the different options that you have during labor and birth, so that whenever those things come up, you're not like looking stuck and confused like a deer in the headlights, right? Because that's when room for other people to start taking control of your birth kind of comes into play. All right, so the reason why I think that it's very important to include like what you want during early labor is important because you don't know what time you're going to get to the hospital, or if you're having a home birth, if you're birthing in a birth center, if you're in your car, like whoever your birth support person is can have a good idea of how they need to support you in that moment, what they can do for you, to kind of help ease the pain and kind of help get you through those contractions. So early labor is very important to me because no matter where you're giving birth at, like you want to be comfortable, you want to feel at peace, because that's really going to set the tone for how you've experienced the rest of your labor. And then as far as actual labor, that transitional period itself, active labor, that's where everything comes in with medical interventions, different types of pain management that you want to receive, if you're okay with instruments being used and just different things like that. A lot of people have the misconception that birth planning is useless. There's no point in doing it because, oh, like I've already had 100 conversations with my OB, so I'm good. I don't need to do anything else. That is completely wrong, incorrect, don't approve. Because think about it. It's like, I know we've all had a teacher like in school before at some point of our life where we're just like, ooh, like, I don't know if she should have been a teacher. I don't think she really liked kids. I don't even think she liked and enjoyed her job. We've all drove through a McDonald's drive-through line and had a cashier that just had an attitude that day and just did not feel like being at work today. And we're like, well, why are you even working here if you don't like your job, right? So we've all had that experience with someone in the workforce. And when it comes to nurses, which I love nurses, my mother is a nurse, but you're going to, and maybe it's like, it's not to say that that's a bad nurse. It might just be that nurse just does not really like fit your vibes. And when you're in birth, if you have a really old school nurse, or if you're a first-time mom and you're very nervous and you have a younger, newer nurse and she's still, getting her footing in or something like that. And so it's like, both of you are just kind of like, okay. And it's not working for you because the fit is just not there. Or if you've got that really old school nurse where you might just want to go in and have more of a physiological experience for the most part without any interventions, without, adding a little Pitocin or something to your IV just to kind of get labor kicking and going. You might not want to do that. You might just want to sit there and chill and just labor in the hospital. And you're right. That's totally fine. But you might have a nurse that's like, okay, like, we can do this, we can do that. And then you're just, no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. And then there's like some clashing going on. So you just never know what you're going to get, because unfortunately, we cannot pick our nursing staff when we walk into the hospital. We don't walk into the room and then like you're going to like a Chinese massage parlor and you've got like a row of nurses to choose from. It is nothing like that. Like, you can't walk in and just be like, okay, so give me your resume. What's your name? What's your experience? What's your birth philosophy? None of that. Like, you can't ask those questions. You could ask them while you're there, but you can't ask them before you get there. So basically, it's like you kind of get who you get. Granted, in very special circumstances, if the hospital, has the staffing for it, if you get a nurse and you are really just butting heads with that nurse, things are just not going, in your favor, and your nurse is really just not taking your preferences into consideration, and you want to ask for a new nurse, you can absolutely do that. However, it's depending on the time you go into the hospital or the hospital that you go into, they might not have the staff to really accommodate that type of request. So it's like, you really want to be prepared, know how to advocate for yourself, know what you're kind of getting into. Even if you're a first-time mom, that's why it's really important to take a childbirth class, or just at least do some pretty good enough research to where you have a good idea of what the different interventions are or how that hospital operates, so that if something does come up, you're not confused and leaving your birth in the hands of a complete stranger. You want to feel confident in your choices and your decisions. You want to be able to even know enough to even make that choice or make a certain decision. I can't tell you how many times as a doula where I've been in the birthing room with the mom, and we're, something, even as a doula, even if a mom does take the classes, right? Because I'm not saying that, oh, if you take birth education classes or if you read these books or watch these videos, you're going to know it all, you're going to be 100% prepared. It's never really like that. Even if you do take a course class or talk to someone with experience, there's always the possibility of something happening that you just could not be prepared. There's like nothing you could have done to know that was going to happen and that you needed to know this. That's a possibility. That's just life. That's birth. Things just happen. There's just really no way to control it. There's really nothing we could have done to prevent that from happening, right? However, what we can prevent from happening is having other people, let's see, what's a good word for it? What we can control is having other people step in something that is meant for us and kind of like take the lead and say that, oh, okay, well, you want a medicated birth, so we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And, oh, she wants a medicated birth, so she knows she doesn't want to feel pain, so she's going to be totally okay with doing this, and that, and the third. And it's like, well, no, although like I do prefer to have an epidural to help with coping with the contractions, but that doesn't mean I want narcotics given to me. That doesn't mean, I'm okay with having this intervention done because I can't feel anything. So that's why it's like just knowing what everything means. If you want pain management, know what that means, know what the side effects are, know what that can lead to. If you are okay with certain, when it comes to like different, because the main thing during birth is you want to be able to move around. You want to have that flexibility. Laboring on your back for long periods of time is not going to help you progress. It's not comfortable. for a long period of time for your baby because they're just in this little space and they need you to move. They need you to get up and active. So even though you've had an epidural and you want a pain-free birth, just know it's still super important to move around. So if you have a nurse or a provider that's kind of pushing you to just like, oh, go to sleep and just hang out like that on your back and just sit on your back, and we'll come in and monitor you and keep checking you for dilation. And then as you get more closer, then, we'll let you know when to push. Like, no, don't do that. Do not do that. And don't feel like you don't have a choice or you don't have a say in the matter, because you 100% do. A lot of the times, this is nothing against hospitals either. I've had 2 hospital births. And I'm a doula, yes. So a lot of the times though in hospitals, if you are not confident in being a decision maker, and if you're not confident in your birth plans, someone is gonna have the availability to take advantage of you, because somewhere down the line, a nurse may read the chart wrong, which has happened, believe it or not, or reading, like when they're monitoring the baby's heartbeat, a nurse is going to say, oh, this is protocol. We need to do this because the baby's heartbeat dropped. You can absolutely decline in certain interventions. You can decline interventions total. You do not have to do what the hospital staff is telling you to do. You don't, and although sometimes things are wrong and you want the best for your baby, and although it says like, okay, the baby's heartbeat dropped, just say, okay, like everybody, let's just take a deep breath. Maybe let's wait a couple of minutes, to see like if things change, or let's just adjust and change position and see if that's it. Because sometimes that can be it. All you need is just a position change, and then baby will be like, okay, cool. Because yes, babies do go into distress sometimes being in a certain position if you're in a certain position and if they're in a certain position. And they will let you know like, no, mom, like I'm gonna need you to move, or I'm gonna need you to go over here because I'm not feeling this, right? And so it doesn't mean like everybody has to freak out and everybody has to panic, because a lot of times things can be corrected without a medical intervention being involved. So just kind of know your options when things like that happen. Like, okay, if baby's blood pressure or heart rate does drop, what does that mean? What can I do? What are some of my options? Am I comfortable with taking a medication to help the heart rate go back up? Or is it just something as simple as, should I let my team know, hey, let me just change positioning and see if this helps? Like let's just wait and not take any action just yet, and just see if something else can be done before we move into the different interventions and medications and things like that. So that's just always something to be aware of. But a lot of times, like I said, you get put in these situations, you don't know what's going to happen. So it's always good to just have an idea of, some different labor complications that can arise. And then if those complications do arise, what can you do to help alleviate them so that you can continue to having a stress-free, peaceful birth. And so when it comes to birth planning, it doesn't have to be super complicated. It really doesn't. Like, it can really be something as simple as you taking notes in your phone in the notes section, you typing it out in a message and sending it to your birth partner, your partner that's going to be with you that day, or friend or family member who's going to be supporting you that day. It's really just that simple. If you prefer to print it out on one page and just have something there for the nurse teams to kind of go off of so that they have an idea of what you're hoping for, then that's great. Again, a lot of people have the misconception like, oh, well, I'm not going to create a birth plan because I know I shouldn't get my hopes on a plan, and that birth plans aren't set in stone. No, they're not. They're not at all. right? But no, so is nothing else. That doesn't mean you don't prepare for it. That doesn't mean you don't plan for it. That doesn't mean that you don't, it's just like having an interview. Granted, there's like some people who are excellent interviewers and they can just walk in a room and it's like, boom, I know I'm going to get the job. Whereas there's some people who have to do a little bit of preparing and preparation for it. And that's cool. Birth is something super important. You should never not prepare yourself for it. You should never not go in with an idea. And it's not something as simple as like, oh, well, I'm going into a hospital, so I totally trust my team. I totally trust. You don't know who you're going to get. You may have had a bunch of conversations with your provider, but guess what? That doesn't mean you're going to deliver with your provider. There could be a very good chance that your provider's either on vacation or they're not the provider that's on call that night. So you're not even going to deliver with them if they're not in the hospital. You can have somebody else who you've never even met before. And they're not going to know all the conversations that you've had with your provider. And so that's why it's a really good idea to just know what you want and be willing to speak on what you want. And if you are not that person and you know you're not that person to be able to speak on what you want, delegate that to someone else to advocate for you, to be there. Like a birth doula, have a midwife there with you. If your partner is more comfortable speaking up in stressful situations, tell your partner like, hey, if you see that I'm getting pushback on something that I really want, that we've discussed that we want for our birth, tell them to let them know. Do not ever settle for something that you don't want during your birth or your labor, because if something goes wrong, you are really, really going to regret it. And it's going to cause mom guilt. It's going to cause postpartum, just like moodiness. That's not going to be good for anybody. At least if your birth does not go as planned, it still went in the way that you made the decisions, you made the choices. At the end of the day, you decided this was best for you and your baby, not someone else. So it's okay if, you wrote like, hey, I want the lights to be dimmed, or I want to have this playlist going, but, something's wrong with the speaker, so you have to have another playlist. That's fine. That's okay. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be super complex story about what you're envisioning for your birth. It could just be simple bullet points like, this is what I would prefer versus, and this is what I absolutely do not prefer. And then in the case of an emergency, this is what I like you to do, and this is what I would like to happen. It could just be that, literally that simple. But I encourage you to do that, because too, as you're planning for your birth, there's going to be things that come up as you're doing it that you're like, oh, I never thought about that before. And you're going to be really glad that you looked something up before you went to the hospital, because sometimes I'm going to tell you straight up, some of these nurses are not too happy to explain things to you. Some of these midwives don't want to explain things to you. So it's also very good to vet who you have on your birth team, so that way you feel protected and you feel safe. So no matter what happens, you have people around you who are like all in for you. So also keep that in mind when it comes to birth planning and preparation. Having a good birth team, like setting yourself up with people who are there to support you in the type of birth that you want to have, that really increases the chances of you having that kind of birth. And that is my little love. So that's all I've got today for you. If you have any questions about birth planning, or if you would like to schedule a birth planning session with me, just click on the link below and I would be happy to go over your birth options with you and help you plan out that great, perfect birth just for you.